Very, very warm and much too generous introduction. I appreciate your asking me yet again for a conference on a subject which is of vital consequence, at least to India, if not to the United States. And I'm very honored to be a part of such a distinguished panel. We're already halfway through the time allotted to me, so I'll try and be a little short because we do have a galaxy speak at greater length. You know, we have these discussions on the rather problematic nature of Indo-US relations so many times. I'm just wondering whether we need to have a different perspective to understand that what might be called the ups and downs of a relationship are the perfectly normal feature of any relations between two countries, especially when one of them is one of the world's greatest powers, if not the greatest power, and which has global interests which sometimes leads them in directions that we would not find very convenient. Same has been true of us for some time. I would say that to call it a relationship that is at a crossroads is a somewhat misleading title because it implies that you have a choice between going forward or going in some other direction. I think, as Ambassador Surendra Kumar himself has pointed out, this is so vital a relationship. It is necessary to try and find ways of going forward. And what are the impediments? As he also pointed out, a great deal is still going on. I'm not sure that I agree with Nick Burns that defense sales are a good way to get to know each other. Sales are sales, and that's it. I mean, it's totally transactional relationship, and so be it. There's no problem with that. But if we want to get to know each other, we have to know a little more about each other than I think Indo-US relations has ever been blessed to have as a guideline. I've always maintained that our relationship has been heavily shaped by two coincidences. The first is that when the United States long ago became independent, it coincided with the period when India was losing its independence. And for the next 200 years, we had virtually nothing to do with each other. What's more, we hardly knew each other. I remember when I left my school in Dehradun to go to school in Washington when we started our diplomatic relations way back in 1941. Out of the 250 odd boys at Doon School, and you can imagine they were from fairly well-to-do background, only one had a relation who had ever been to the United States. So that was the extent to which we knew each other. We also got influenced heavily by the only means we got to know each other, which was the British. And the British, on one hand, projected the Jungle Book, and although Catherine Mayo was an American, she wrote all kinds of stories which were the stuff of colonial condescension, so that the image in America of India was not exactly a very well-informed one. And equally, we in India seem to have been rather more heavily influenced than we realize by the disdain of the British for their transatlantic country cousins, crude and immature and all the rest of it. These legacies have not entirely disappeared, I'm sorry to say. There are a good many hangs-ups on both sides. And then for the first 40 years or so of our relationship, ignorance was compounded by differences of a major nature. Immediately after our independence, we in India thought the greatest issue in the world was decolonization and the ending of imperialistic control both of the economy and of territory, whereas the United States considered the elimination of what they called international communism, so that what had been a very odd relationship became infused by a real conflict of interest, especially when America started to supply arms aid to Pakistan. So we've always had this background to emerge from, and what helped us emerge from it was frankly the end of the Cold War on the one hand, where some of the old conflicts virtually became irrelevant. And secondly, the emergence of India as a major economic factor in international life. It was only after the 90s that we really started to build on each other. And then came on the nuclear deal as an example of what could have been a vital strategic relationship. Now, there is no question in my mind that much of that was what is known as China-driven. Both of us have apprehensions as to China's future role. And though I think we are both, it is fair to say, trying quite hard to develop a constructive and positive relationship with China, there is a certain apprehension about the future which makes it necessary for us to compare notes, if not actually cooperate. Now, the reason why we feel that there is a coma in the doldrums, if you choose your expression, the fact of the matter is that you can't have nuclear deals every day. I mean, obviously, there is a level at which relationships go on and on, regardless of the lack of drama. I'm not sure that Indo-American relations ever actually reached such a comfort level. I think they still do need a lot of nurturing. But the fact that they could be so damaged by this rather terrible incident of our maltreatment of our Deputy Consul General, to which Ambassador Surinder Kumar referred, it's not just a question that whether India was right in its reaction. Of course there was outrage. It was all very well for the United States to say that they had only followed standard procedure. A civilized country makes distinctions about its procedures, and the argument that we followed standard procedure, forgive my reminding everyone, was used by some rather nasty people in concentration camps also. It doesn't really hold water. What I found more alarming was the degree to which even diplomats in both countries started to lose their cool. The first thing a diplomat is taught is that emotion should never play a part in your conduct of relations, except in one case, that anger is deliberately shown as a means of diplomacy. But in this case, there was an outburst of feeling which reflects that lack of what I might call the basic anchorage or ballast in our relationship. Now, emotion does play a part. The United States of all countries should know. For instance, when France had the temerity to oppose the American entry into Iraq, there was such an outrage in America that the import of French wines was banned, the import of French cheese was banned, in America, the menus were changed, so you no longer got French fries, but American fries. I mean, it's perfectly natural for a mass of people to have these emotions. But that's something that governments have to deal with. Let's hope that they have dealt with it sufficiently to bring us back to some kind of normalcy, and indeed, it's evident that a certain number of things are going on. So I would say that the choice is not to go left, right, or backwards. We have to keep going forward, because the decline of the United States, which is one of the most talked about subjects, is like Mark Twain's remark about his death, that it was somewhat premature. I do believe the United States is and will long remain the only power in the world that can influence the course of events wherever it chooses to. And we have so many commonalities of interest that we do need to keep comparing notes. So I would say that there is a realization on both countries that this is something that needs to be kept going forward. Every country after the end of the Cold War has become so inward-looking and so full of its internal problems that I think a lot of what has become the apparent decline or lack of progress in Indo-American relations is simply the internal preoccupations of both countries. I am not pessimistic on that score. I am more pessimistic on the score that we still, after all these years, don't really understand each other, and we need to have far more dialogue. I'm sure that today's kind of considerations will help us find more precise pointers, and I now leave it to this distinguished panel to give us some more insights. Thank you very much indeed.